Welcome to the Keynote stage. So my name is Mark Walsh. I'm the founder of this conference and part of the leadership team with Daniela and Manel. We have got quite a feast, quite a treat in store for you. The main stage doesn't have all the top names on. Some of them are spread out for various logistical reasons, but there are some awesome presenters on this stage. This stage is also sponsored by Alain Stefani. When we first had the idea of getting sponsors, I basically said, I won't take anyone as a sponsor unless I love what they do, because otherwise it doesn't have any integrity for me. I didn't know who Alain Stefani was, but I met her in Berlin. Someone said, oh, she's an intimacy teacher, she's an ex-sex worker, best-selling author in Germany. And I said, okay, well, I'll meet her. And I met her. And as soon as I met her, I felt at ease. I felt like, wow, this is a person who's playful, but also a deep listener. This is a woman who's a real leader. Since I've seen her work with people in very, around trauma, around intimacy, around very difficult areas, men and women, I've come to regard her as a friend, actually. I love her. So go to her website and check it out. It's Alain, I-L-A-N, Stefani, S-T-E-P-H-A-N for November I, AlainStefani.com. There's an offer there called Love and Rage, which is as juicy as it sounds. You'll also find links in the descriptions for the videos below.
Very warm welcome to everybody joining us this evening here with Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. He is a psychiatrist, researcher, professor of psychiatry at Boston University, and one of the world's leading experts on post-traumatic stress, especially when it comes to how trauma affects the brain, the body, and the nervous system. I could say a lot more, but I don't really know that you need much more introduction. So, goedenavond, welkom, and please take it away.
Great, thank you. So let's start here. There's an old Peter Bruegel painting of trauma, of Icarus falling into the water. This is how trauma happens. And the British poet W.H. Auden wrote a poem about his painting, which hangs in Brussels. And he says, about suffering, the ancients were never wrong. How it happens while somebody else is just opening a window or plowing the field or sailing, and it comes by. And one thing about trauma is that people love trauma. They love to see pictures, they love to see dangerous pictures, they read books about murders, they cannot stop reading about traumatic stuff. And then the moment that they've read it, go on and say, okay, forget, let's go to the next one. Huh? And so when you're traumatized, something happens. And sometimes for a moment, people pay attention, but everybody says, get over it. And then you're left by yourself, and everybody else goes on with their lives. And so over the years, I started off working with Vietnam veterans. And I'll show you a movie about a veteran and some of the stuff that really struck me about the body back then. And then over time, I've done this work for about as long as anybody here. It became clear that most of these issues have their roots in the early attachment relationship, and that most trauma is really intertwined with attachment. And attachment is not just a feeling of feeling safe with somebody. Attachment is about rhythmicity. And the issue of rhythmicity is something that up to now our field has paid very little attention to, at least psychologists, social workers, therapists, etc. So the way that this picture came about is that one of the things that really intrigued me is how many people who are traumatized define themselves according to their trauma. And so you meet somebody who says, I'm a Vietnam veteran, I'm a survivor of Pinochet, I'm an incest survivor, and how the trauma becomes a central piece of their identity. And so I became very intrigued with how you can help people to change their identity from being a hurt, traumatized person a long time ago to getting a new identity. And so I got very involved in theater. And that's one of the reasons that I'm living where I am right now in the Berkshires, because we have a program called Shakespearean company, which has a beautiful therapeutic program called Shakespeare in the Courts. And when you're a juvenile delinquent in our county, you have about a 50% chance that if you get caught by the police, that the judge will condemn you to become a Shakespearean actor. And half the kids choose to go to jail rather than to become a Shakespearean actor. And I don't blame them for it, because becoming a Shakespearean actor is very hard. But what I learned in the acting work that we did, and I took the advanced training course there, is that if you play the role, let's say, of Richard III, and you become a hunchbacked evil man and say, "Now is the winter of our discontent made summer by the son of York," you start feeling what it feels like to be an evil queen. And when you play Lady Macbeth, who blackmails her husband to commit a murder in order to assure having sex with her, you feel what it feels like to be an evil, powerful queen when you say, "If he had not so resembled my father, I would have done the deed myself." And so acting a new role in your body and putting on the costume makes you feel, oh, that's what it feels like to be somebody other than who I am. And so a very core issue of being traumatized is that you tend to get more and more constricted. Your body gets constricted, your mind gets constricted, your thinking gets constricted in that role of the world is a very dangerous place and I feel helpless. And trauma treatment should consist of opening up your mind to new possibilities. Theater is useful for it. The main lab I run right now is a psychedelic lab, where we have people go through psychedelic experience to open up their insights. And my favorite treatment, which I won't talk too much about actually, is psychodrama, where people get to play different roles and get to feel what it feels like to play different roles in life. So, to make a long story short, we took this advanced Shakespearean acting training, and one of our fellow actors, Louise Franconi, became pregnant during that training, and then she had a baby, and she called that baby after the town where she conceived that baby, Lennox. And then 8 months later, she sent this picture to us.
Hi. 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 I want to. Hello. Hi. Oi. Wee. Ba. 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 Hi. 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 Hi.
So this is who we are. We are monkeys with a big forebrain. We are communal creatures. In America, people still believe that we're individuals and that we have individual psychopathology, but that is really a nonsensical understanding about human beings. We are deeply embedded in each other, embedded in the culture. We are part of each other, and the main reason why we have a brain is to be in tune with other people, and the main reason why we have a brain is to be able to share things, do webcasts, cook dinners, build houses, set up clinics, stuff like that, to do communal things. It's all about us.
I just want to interrupt you for a second, because people are saying that they can't hear you really well. Is there a way that you can come a little closer to the mic?
They can't hear me.
Thank you. Wonderful.
Let me see. There's a way of increasing the sound, but okay, I'll stay close to the microphone. Anyway, so we are deeply interconnected human beings, and as time has gone on, I've come to understand trauma more and more as a rhythmical disconnection between us and the people around us. If I, at the end of this webcast, walk out and I see my wife looking really dejected, I need to say to her, "What's going on, honey?" And to adjust my body rhythms to hers. And not to say to her, "You're looking stupid, you're always depressed, why don't you just do something?" Because that will only make her more depressed. So the function of human beings is to pick up each other's rhythms and to really help people to restore their rhythms. That's what parenting is all about. When your kid has a temper tantrum, you can have a choice. You can beat that kid up, and they may stop crying at some point, but it will leave an imprint of my parents are cruel and there's something terribly wrong with me. Or you can help that kid to calm themselves down. And if you abuse a kid, the kid will start crying and say, "Please don't hit me." And hopefully you will not hit that kid. But trauma occurs when you try to send out signals of "don't do this to me," and people do it anyway. And so trauma is about your environment not picking up your needs, your rhythms, and etc., etc. And because we come from a world of psychology,
Hi.
we tend to get stuck in psychological paradigms of talking and drugs. But what we haven't really explored is how we can move each other by rhythms, movement, singing, etc., etc., which is very much at the foundation of what trauma is about. So here's some slides from Kolk, a professor in Edinburgh, who has been studying the musicality between mothers and infants. And this is very much the world that I live in, where my research also lives in, and that is how our brains get shaped by the interactions we have with people around us, by the movements we make with people around us, by the reciprocity between us and the people around us, and that forms our brain. I don't know if Bruce Perry is in this conference, Stephen Porges certainly is, but a whole bunch of us really understand that the brain is formed by the accumulation of rhythmical interactions between us and our environment, which forms our brain. And in the past 20, 30 years ago, we have learned an enormous amount about neuroscience, which I'm not going to talk about this time, but what we have learned is that our brain gets formed by interactions. Our brain is a predictive organ. Our brain tells us that if I do a certain things, I can expect that reaction. If it's a certain temperature, I can expect something. So the brain is all about expectations and about a map that we carry inside of our brain of who we are in relationship to our surroundings. And that map is formed on the basis of early experiences. And if we want to change those maps, we actually need to have visceral motoric experiences to rewire those maps, which is extraordinarily difficult. We cannot only talk, but our expectations in our brain are changed. My friend Marty Teicher, who many people would consider the premier neuroscientist in the area of trauma in the world, recently did a meta-analysis in which he looked at all the brain studies in psychiatry that had been done, and he was able to show that if you control for abuse and neglect, none of the studies are relevant. The only thing that we know is how the brain gets damaged by abuse and neglect, and gets damaged in very specific ways. I'm not going to go into details about it, do it some other time. And so this is who we are. This is Andy Meltzoff, a colleague who's my age in Seattle, who as a young man goes into a newborn nursery. He sticks out his tongue, and this 5-hour-old baby sticks out her tongue. If you know anything about 5-hour-old babies, they don't have a brain. There's nothing there except instinct. And the instinct of even newborn babies is to imitate their environment. He opens up his mouth, and the baby opens her mouth, and he frowns, and the baby frowns. So we're deeply imitative creatures. That's put a heavy burden on us as psychotherapists, in that our patients who work with us will look at us as an example of who they need to become and who they need to be. We are reflective, resonating animals that learn from each other. If you ever meet an American with a slight Dutch accent, it's likely they have worked in my lab for a long time because they picked up my accent. So we are imitative creatures. Another example. One more little tip. This is from de Varten.
He's asking for it. She doesn't get it. He asks again. She still doesn't get it. And then she... Now listen to this. Don't you know this song?
Do you get it? Let me just...
Oh, tell me some more, baby. Tell me some more, baby. Oh.
Now you see what's happening. She's making phrases with final lengthening. You know, tell me some more then, and that sound is made long, and the baby vocalizes on that sound. And she's very pleased, and she closes and she comes down with the principal formula, which is where the sound, the pitch is, down to middle C. This is C.
Good. Come on. Again. Come on, then. That's clever.
And then when the baby responds, she's very excited, and so it develops.
Oh, yes. Is that right?
Goes right up to an octave
Tell me some
above.
more, then.
This is a whole octave. And then the climax, they synchronize.
Tell me some more, baby. Oh. Come on.
And then here's this pitch downturn of the baby.
Good. Good.
And it's very satisfying. This is one of those autonomic cycles. This is one of those cycles of pitch plot analysis. Oh, we got some recordings from Lynn Murray of depressed mother speaking to baby. This is a happy mother speaking to an 8-week-old.
Oh, boy. See. See.
I said there's a vast literature on how these early interactions shape the brain and shape one's identity, which, much to my chagrin, has never made it into most psychotherapy courses. But if you follow sort of our work, we always have major attachment researchers be part of our organization. So, of course, the big change that has happened, most of what we're talking about is not new and was sort of around 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And even in many ways, I think psychotherapy may have been better 30 or 40 years ago before it became as prescriptive as it is today. But what we have learned is something about the brain. And it is also surprising to me to what degree what we know about the brain has not been incorporated in psychotherapy, and how many psychotherapies that I hear about really are sort of opposed to how the brain works. And so I'll just say a few things about it, and that is that here's our brain, and here's our frontal cortex. That's what we use right now. So you're trying to learn something, and I'm going to say something, and I'm going to give you hopefully a whole bunch of interesting stories, all frontal lobe material. The frontal lobe is a beautiful part of ourselves. It is creative, it's verbal, it is imaginative, it's connected with people, it is magnificent. It's also the area where most psychotherapists work. The problem is that's not where trauma's imprint is. People don't become traumatized because they're stupid. People don't become traumatized because they don't understand things. And I'm astounded by the degree to which CBT and correcting people's wrong perceptions has become a mainstream in psychology. Like, how low have we sunk that we think that you can talk people into being reasonable? Certainly in America right now, try to be reasonable with our current president and be, it doesn't work. It doesn't work with Trump, and it doesn't work with anybody else. Try it with your husband and try to be reasonable with him and try to convince him of the, it doesn't work because these deep emotions are lodged deep inside of us. They're lodged in our brainstem, in our cerebellum, in our hippocampus, in our amygdala, and there are no pathways from there to there. So you cannot talk yourself into being reasonable. And so to just give it a little bit more substance, so we come into the world with our little brainstem. So our brainstem does what little babies can do. What can little babies do? They can sleep, they can be awake, they can be hungry, they can suck, they can breathe, they can burp, they can pee, and they can poop, and they can breathe, and that's about it. And we are programmed to find creatures like that cute, which is good because so many of us. And so psychotherapists don't go there. We don't ask people about breathing and appetite and sucking and pooping and peeing, but that's where trauma hits. Trauma hits in the core survival part of the brain, what Antonio Damasio calls the housekeeping of the body. And you really don't get better until you learn to re-regulate the housekeeping of your body. There was nothing in my training that taught me anything about it because it was all about understanding, insight, and talking. And if that didn't work, we give people drugs. And then about 20 years ago, 50 years ago, I am hauled into a yoga studio, actually across the mountain from where I am right now. And I take this yoga class reluctantly. And being a psychiatrist, I listen to the thought patterns of my yoga teacher. And I think, that's interesting. This man has word salad. He has loose associations. He has a thought disorder. I have a schizophrenic yoga teacher. I think that's interesting. He's also a good yoga teacher. And I think, maybe doing yoga is keeping this guy out of having to go to an institution for the criminally insane. So that's the first time I get exposed to a way of rearranging that bottom-up, primitive survival part of the brain that actually can regulate these very deep structures, which language certainly cannot do. And so later on I did the first NIMH-funded yoga study, and it turns out that yoga is a more effective treatment for PTSD than any drug that anybody has ever studied. The interesting thing is also, I've not seen a single psychopharmacology clinic turn into a yoga studio because there's no money in them Dar Hills. So you become very aware of how money makes the world go round. And then the second part of the brain that is formed, that's also an unconscious part, it's the limbic system. And basically the limbic system comes online in this first 4, 5, 6 years of your life and forms your character. And the limbic system is very much a part of your brain that is that map of the world. This is what will happen if I do that. This is what people will do if I do that. It's a cause and effect part of your brain. It's your emotional brain. And certainly trauma really impacts very heavily on that part of your brain. And that makes you expect to get hurt, expect to get bullied, expect to do something. And despite your best efforts, you cannot really talk yourself out of making that difference. And the only thing that can change that limbic system is having visceral, emotional, and motoric experiences that are directly contradictory to that map of the world that you get over there. I should talk much more about it. I'm not going to, because we only have a very short period of time. So here's an example of what happens when people get traumatized. These are pictures from September 11th in New York. And what you see that people are getting, when something terrible happens to people, adults or children, what they do is they don't have thoughts. They start moving. So the moment you are confronted with a threat, your body moves. And that's a very critical issue, that in order to survive, you need to activate your fight-flight reaction. And not only do you start to move, but after a lot of thinking of what happened in New York, this picture was very important for me. One of my colleagues, we go have all these meetings, and one of my colleagues shows you this picture of people running over the Brooklyn Bridge. Any of you who know New York is that New Jersey is over there, Connecticut is over there, and Brooklyn and Long Island is over here. And I bet there is nobody on this bridge who lives in New Jersey or in Connecticut, because when you're terrified, your body starts moving automatically, and it starts moving has a little GPS that tells you, go home. So mammals have an intrinsic sense of, we have a home. And if you go home, we will be safe. And for many of us, that is the case. So this issue of having a safe home is terribly important. And so we do all these studies, my colleagues and I, these studies about what happens after 9/11, and there was very little PTSD. The people who got PTSD after the attack on the World Trade Center were people who were living at home with traumatized veterans, who were domestic violence people, who had previous abuse, for whom home was not safe. So basically, as long as our homes are safe, we can come to rest and calm ourselves down. And that slowly is beginning to sort of move into that as long as your attachment system is intact, as long as we are there for each other, we are going to survive. But if people beat you up or molest you in response to something bad, then the whole system falls apart. And so as this whole thing is going on, I have a flashback to the last page of my anatomy textbook in medical school. And I think to myself, yeah, Frank Netter really got it. When people are threatened, our research has shown the frontal lobe shuts down, you take leave of your senses. I bet everybody who's listening to this knows what that feels like. When you're really angry or really frightened, you become a blubbering idiot. Nobody who is really frightened, take our president, he's a blubbering idiot. He's always angry. So he doesn't make any sense because there is no frontal lobe. You have to be calm to be intelligent. You have to be calm to understand things. So what happens when you're angry or frightened? Your limbic system takes over. Your limbic system is all about survival and activates your body. And what's clearly the case, that when you get PTSD, this system is running your show. Your limbic system continues to send you messages, activate yourself, do things. And as Peter Levine and other people have pointed out, trauma is played out in the theater of the body. And I could give you a long talk about it, about how at the end, what we understand today is that the core expression of trauma is not so much mental, but it's about all the physiological, health, and body things that are residue. So even in studies where people mentally seem to no longer have PTSD, for many of them, their bodies continue to behave as if their bodies are in threat. And so the ultimate challenge for us who try to treat trauma is how do we help the body to become safe, the body to become calm, and the body to be present focused and take care of what's going on right now. Yeah? And so, what we're really dealing with.
Ask a very quick question, because this is exactly what one of the things in the Q&A was about, is what do you do when you're not safe? Do you need to create safety first?
I'll tell you what I can, okay? So it's over here, deeper part of the brain. I'll skip these little things. Well, this actually is not bad. So this is Jaak Panksepp, great neuroscientist, died 2 years ago, a friend of mine. And he studies the neurobiology of play. And the natural thing for human beings, mammals, rats, dogs, is to play. And by playing, you get to learn things, you learn to get along with people, you get to feel good about yourself. And so it's normal to play, essential to play. And then rats, just like human beings, if you introduce a cat hair into the cages, they stop playing. And the end of play lasts for days and days and days. So frightened people do not play. So the critical issue for us is indeed to make people as safe as possible so they can start playing and imagining and doing things that they ordinarily do not do. So basically we are monkeys, and the security that we have in our attachment system determines how well we can play, how well we can organize things, etc., etc. So here's another example. This is a tape from the lab of my very good friend Ed Tronick, who has been studying mother-child interactions from very early on. He has a paradigm called the still face paradigm. So he is one of his postdoctoral students, and she's playing in the lab with her 2-year-old little boy. And at some point, about 30 seconds in, the mom will be told, she has a little bug in her ear, to freeze her face. As the mother stops being part of this rhythmical interaction with her kid, you'll see something happening on the screen that is mildly distressing to you. But what I really want you to pay attention to is what happens to you as you watch this tape. Because this is my illustration of the mirror neuron system. And that you see something on the screen and something happens in your body that parallels what happens to the little boy or to his mom, and you feel unpleasant sensations in your body as you notice this.
Here's your juice. Here you go. Oh, the dinosaur's gonna drink the juice? Good. Oh no, is the alligator gonna eat the dinosaur? Help! Oh, you give the dinosaur a kiss? That's nice.
Now she's told to freeze her face, so that nice reciprocity stops.
I think I'm boy. I do. She
says, "Mommy, it's me." You can see how distressed mom is also.
Mommy. Mommy. I love you. Mommy, 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 mommy.
Hey, CJ. Were you saying something?
I did it.
The alligator. What did the alligator do?
Mama.
Oh, give him a kiss. Mwah. What can we make? Oh, you want to play basketball? Okay.
So peace and quiet has been restored, and you could almost say this was a good experience, because this boy has a very harmonious relationship with his mom. Like every kid I've ever known, he temporarily becomes very distressed, and 2 minutes later mom is back, and he gets an imprint in his limbic system and his dorsolateral prefrontal cortex that says, I can become really upset, but before too long my mom comes back. So this is how you get object constancy, how disruptions of relationship get repaired and restored back to safety, which is a good experience. And of course, if you suffer from borderline personality disorder or other chronic issues with neglect, this feeling of before too long my mom will be back and I'll be okay again does not get laid down in your brain, and you are always worried that people will desert you forever. And so it's a core issue of how do you get that object constancy. Now, it's not that this little experience leaves no imprint, because we are the accumulation of our experiences. And so this little boy comes back 6 months later to the laboratory. They hook him up with a little cannula, measure his serum cortisol, and when he walks into this room, his serum cortisol goes up just a little bit. He's getting a little message over here from that way dark reaches of the brain, like, I don't like this room. And you'll say to this boy, why don't you like this room? You say, because I don't like the color, or I don't like the paint. And he'll have absolutely no memory about what happened there, but his perceptual system will pick up that there is something that I don't like about this. And so that is true for all of us. All of us get all these messages all the time. I like that chair and I don't like that chair. I like that pillow, I don't like the pillow. I like that food, I don't like that food. We make these choices on the basis of deep subcortical imprints of past experience. Very hard to change. I'm going to skip this one. But I'm just going to show you. So these are, because movies has been around for slightly over 100 years, we know now what trauma looked like 100 years ago. So through YouTube, you can see movies about what trauma looked like in the First World War. And when you see it, it's very different from how people present themselves today.
Shell shock represented a kind of mutiny, a personal withdrawal from an intolerable reality. Not all, or even most soldiers, suffered from shell shock. But those who did were sobering examples of what mechanized warfare could do to human beings.
Rifleman Arthur Russell was, or had been, a magnificent specimen of manhood, 6 feet tall. There was not a mark on him, yet he was helpless as a child. When I returned about a month later, I found Russell trying to walk. His speech was slowly returning, a slow, halting speech full of stammers. But I doubt if he ever again became a fully fit man.
The symptoms were often tied to an event on the battlefield. The soldier who bayoneted an enemy in the face developed a facial tic. This man responded to nothing, except the word bomb, shell shock.
So it goes on, it goes on and on. Huh? So 100 years ago, the expression of PTSD was different from what it was today. It was very motoric, it was very muscular, but the body expressed it. And having been a study of trauma for a long time, in the Second World War, it got expressed more in heart disease and stomach disease, and after Vietnam, it got expressed more as abnormal behaviors. So culture shapes it, but the body continues to drive it. And so here's a more...
Vane, maybe this would be a good moment for people to maybe shake it off, because that might have been a little, impactful to watch. So take care of yourself.
I mean, that's what we do for a living, you know, this is what we see all the time. So I hope this is not new for you in a way. So here's a contemporary picture, British movie, that really shows how trauma expresses itself today. So here's a 21-year-old veteran from the war in Kosovo who goes shopping with his grandma at the supermarket. And unfortunately, wait a second. What is happening here? Why is this working?
We all get a moment to breathe. That's good.
Good. Oh, I didn't expect this to be hard for you guys. I'm sorry. Do you see this?
You find the
Get to the
ingredients
movie?
of a fruitcake.
You could just buy one.
I'm gonna make you one.
So he goes shopping. You see the movie? So he's going with his grandma. Grandma is not a traumatized person. And grandma wants to bake a cake. And look at the way she walks to the supermarket. She's like a...
We're not seeing it, unfortunately. We're seeing a still of the PowerPoint. So.
Oh, that's why I asked you. Did you see the movie? You didn't, huh? Okay, let me stop screen share. Let me show it again. Now you can see it. You can see it now?
You find the ingredients of a fruitcake.
You could just buy one.
I'm gonna make you one.
I said, it's grandma, and you see the way she moves. Like a bat out of hell, she ignores the flowers, she ignores the special offers. And this is a very important part to function well, is to ignore a lot of things. You can stay focused on that cake that you want to bake. That's one of the things that breaks down when you have PTSD. That filtering system that can filter out, that doesn't matter, it doesn't matter, it doesn't work. And your body is continuously flooded by input. And this is grandson. And grandson slouches through a supermarket. He isn't going anywhere. And this reminds me about Pavlov, the great Russian physiologist. Pavlov, of course, is the father of PTSD to some degree. He was the guy who discovered if you pair meat with a bell, dogs will start salivating in response to a bell, which of course is the nature of PTSD, that certain sensory things bring back the feelings of the past. And that was one of Pavlov's great contributions. The other one is that Pavlov's lab got flooded back in 1924, and his dogs got very messed up. And rather than getting new dogs, Pavlov studied what happened to these dogs, and what he realized is that these dogs were standing in cages while the icy water came into the lab, and they couldn't escape. And Pavlov says the inability to engage your fight-flight reaction, the inability to start moving, had a major detrimental effect on these dogs, and they lost their instinct of purpose. And then Darwin says the instinct of purpose is the most important instinct of the animal kingdom, about knowing how to move your body in space and to move your body purposefully.
I can't afford anything else. I want to get back. I can't afford anything else. I haven't got 15 quid in my pocket. Look, hang on a minute, let go. How much is this? What's wrong with this one? Eh?
And all of us have seen scenes like this in supermarkets and in parking lots, and most of us leave those people alone. Some people don't. And so what makes people get involved in that or not depends on our reward system in our brain. And when you're traumatized, your reward system in your brain changes, and things that are neutral to other people become very important to you, and people that are very pleasurable to other people don't mean anything to you. So one of the things that you see when you get traumatized, when you get molested as a kid, getting beaten up may give you a sense of sexual pleasure. Seeing violence may turn you on. Jumping off high buildings may actually give you a sense of pleasure. Driving 120 miles an hour makes you feel alive. That's not true for most of us. So your brain changes. It's not about the memory so much. It's about how trauma changes your brain. And so you respond to things differently.
Okay, well, what about this one then? Why? You haven't got one of these, eh? I got you some sweets round there. Now, what's your problem? What is your problem? Christy! Jesus. What are you looking at?
What are you crying for? I've seen kids who've really got a reason to cry. You've got all your arms and legs. Your head hasn't been shot off. Yous. None of yous know. If only yous knew how lucky you are.
Get out of here before I call somebody.
I've seen people on fire.
You should keep him locked up.
This is a very good portrayal of what it's like to be a traumatized person. You do things that scare other people. You do things that make you feel ashamed. And they have very little to do with the past. It has to do with your automatic reactions. And so what I'd like to say about this guy is talking with this guy about his war trauma is probably not going to do him a lot of good. What he needs to do is to, let me see, how do I do this again? Is to activate his capacity to be fully alive in the here and now. He needs to get supermarket therapy. So he can just go to the supermarket and be quiet and get his cake. And so the issue of trauma is, how do you help people to be focused on the present and to be fully alive here and to react accordingly? And so I have a lot of things here, and it's going much faster than I had hoped for, but just let me show you some things that can help you to calm these things down. And so here's one example of what we would do in a school system. This is all how the brain involves trauma. I'm sorry, I wish I had more time for this. Here's a good example.
Please put your hand mindfully on your anchor spot, your heart or belly. Breathing in, breathing out. Nice, Taylor. 1 minute of mindful breathing all by yourself with your hand on your anchor spot, your heart or your belly. Which one do you use, your heart or your belly? Your heart? Okay, so you're gonna really feel your breath here when you notice, when you're saying your anchor words in your mind. Can you say them with me? Okay.
And so what you do here, you activate the interoceptive pathway of the brain, which is the only way.
Our job is to be really curious about what's happening inside of ourselves. I want you to write, I wonder, and write about one of your feelings on the inside. So I'm going to read Layla's to help and give you an example, okay? Layla's wondering,
I wonder why I get so disappointed at my brother.
I wonder why I get so disappointed at my brother. Okay. We're going to practice saying, I am so focused. Okay? In a calm and sweet voice.
I am so focused. I am so focused. I am so focused.
Now whisper. The next thing we're going to do is layers of sound. Open your ears really big and see if you can notice any sounds you hear outside of the school. Our job is to be curious today about what we notice. Now, bring your attention to sounds inside of our school, but outside of the yoga room. I'll open the door. Just listening.
So the job is to activate
and see if you can
interoceptive,
really listen
mindful
to any
pathways
sounds that you
to
might be
oneself.
hearing inside of you. Put one hand on your heart
And learning how to calm yourself down.
and one hand on your belly. Come up to sitting. I'm so curious about your noticings. We're working on being curious about things we hear outside of ourselves and inside. The next thing we're going to do is use the glitter bottles or our mind jars.
A mind jar is our glitter bottle. When you shake it, you put it down and see how your brain is moving around. You use it when you have strong feelings. It just makes me feel mindful and calm.
Yoga time is ending and we are lying down. Bellies up. Make a singing bowl in front of your heart, an imaginary singing bowl. Grow your heart really big. Put all of your kind wishes in your singing bowl. And send the love and your wishes out to the world.
So I thought I would be able to cram much more into 1 hour. but I don't. And so my dream is that with all the knowledge we have learned about trauma, is that every school system in the world would have the 4 R's: reading, writing, arithmetic, and self-regulation. That every kid is taught that we have intrinsic self-regulatory mechanisms having to do with touch, movement, rhythmicity, reciprocity, by which we can make ourselves feel calmer. So I'll just give you the final thing. So I'm going to end up with a videotape of one of my favorite dancers. I lived in Hawaii for a long time, and I love doing the hula. And this is a hula program at a maximum security prison for people who are in prison for life for having been extremely violent people. So you may see what the hell I'm talking about here. This is the adult equivalent of the very first video I showed you of that mother and that baby being in tune with each other. And so the treatment about trauma is to help people to be back in tune with each other, to move together rhythmically, because that's our nature. So here's just a great example of a great treatment program for extremely traumatized, extremely violent people.
Twice a week, a small group of men inside San Quentin State Prison get together and practice hula. But not the touristy stuff you're probably thinking of. This is the cultural practice of hula, which is actually more like a moving meditation than a dance. And for a few inmates, it's helping in their rehabilitation.
So Kumu comes in and he's like, yeah, all right, guys, so get ready, I'm gonna teach you hula. And we was like, hula?
Upu Ama was one of those men in the hula classes. He served a long sentence inside San Quentin.
I served 24 years for murder.
Patrick Makuakane was his teacher.
That's the only answer there is in class. Yes.
He was like always there and very into making things happen, wanted to be a better dancer.
I liked it. I liked what how it empowered me, the chants that Kumu taught us.
Upu calls him Kumu, the Hawaiian word for teacher.
They talk a lot, they're rambunctious, and they love to laugh at each other when someone makes a mistake.
Pre-hula, I was a very dark person, man. I gave myself permission to just do some, like I said, some terrible things. I gotta live with that. But today, hopefully, that's not who I am today.
Who he is today is a man who credits hula for his transformation.
Well, hula kind of really springboarded for me. Like I said, I think had I not found myself spiritually, I still would be searching.
Upu was released on parole in September of 2017. At first glance, a prison might be the last place you'd think hula would fit. And especially so in San Quentin, which has a reputation for being very tough. And hula, well, it does not have a masculine reputation.
That type of movement in prison really it doesn't look good, but I'm glad that we reached in ourselves to overcome that.
Patrick says hula forced the men to be more vulnerable, which is something you typically don't want to be in prison.
Being a man, especially a man in prison, your masculinity is everything. That's who you are. You don't want anybody giving you a problem, and the way you shut that down is presenting yourself as a tough guy.
It makes us learn something that we're not used to, and we're doing that together as a unit. And I think that breaks down a lot of cultural barriers.
But here's the thing.
So this is why I'm telling you all these stories. It's about that our core sense of joy and connectivity is through reciprocal rhythms and movements with each other. For the Dutch people among you, even the Dutch Reformed people do that. They go to church, they're the gloomiest people in the world, and they go to church, they say, "Oh God, now bless you, miserable sinner." And when you sing that together, you feel calmer and you feel safer together. And we know today, and I don't have the time to tell you all about it, that singing together and moving together changes these core brain structures that get damaged by trauma, And you see this evolve all around the world. You see it when you go to Argentina, and people have developed tango dancing, extraordinarily complex, and people aren't doing tango dancing because it's cute for tourists. People develop tango dancing because they had to, because it's a very traumatized place. But when you get your body to move with other bodies and to be in sync with other people, you feel safe, you feel calm, and you feel responded to. So this is the big dimension that's at this point is missing in psychology, is missing in therapy. Your insurance companies are way behind, of course. They will never pay you to do all these things that work. But part of the
we know now
to you is that this is what you need to do if you want to overcome your trauma. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Actually, I was going to ask you about your top embodiment tip right after some more announcements. So maybe you have another one besides that. So I just wanted to say that after this, an hour after this, we will have a lovely discussion or talk between Dan Siegel and Alanis Morissette on this channel, the Keynote channel. If you want to hang out in a coffee break and talk about this after a little bit, you can click the link that's going to be put in the chat. And there is also, if you type in coffee breaks in the search bar, you can find those and maybe co-regulate with some people that were also impacted by this, by the images that we were shown and the way that we were led through that. So I'm very grateful that we got some soothing at the end, because I think we needed that. So thank you for that, for bringing us full circle. If you want to own this conversation or this talk and all of the other talks, you can either buy the recordings for this Keynote channel, any of the other channels, or the full package. You will be doing yourself a great favor because you can digest all of this at your own pace, even though, you know, the recording will be available for 48 hours. So that might be your pace. That's enough.
Thank you.
You will also do us a great favor because this is wonderful to put on, but it's not free. But we are trying to provide it to people for free. So if you have any way of helping us out with that, then that's greatly appreciated. There are links to Dr. van der Kolk's work as well. So please follow him, buy books. There was a question if you're writing a new book, question mark. Yeah, so if you want to join us for any of the other conversations, then please do that. Thank you so much for joining us.